I'm here at the velodrome in Sanu here in Mallorca, and I've got two helmets to test. This has been my main helmet for a long time, but I've recently forked out for this bad boy and I want to see if it's quicker. Of course, every helmet is individual to the person and position, so it needs to be tested before I actually use this helmet. I've got my time trial bike here as well, of course, to test my position, and we're going to be running a few laps in each of these, and I'm just going to run some B-roll whilst I talk to you over the protocol. If you want to skip the protocol and you just want to go straight to the results, I'm going to have the chapters down below, but let's get into it. For my test protocol, I performed 15 laps on each helmet and I repeated this 3 times. Each time I did the event, it was 4.85 kilometers, so it was a grand total of nearly 30k. I alternated the helmets, so it was Poc, then Giro, then Poc, then Giro, as there was varying wind conditions, so I was hoping this would smooth out that data. I then took 2 minutes rest in between each helmet, and I averaged 250 watts for each run, which I actually managed to stick to really well. I was of course following the black line as hard as I could the whole time around to make sure that the distance was consistent. Of course, the position was also held exactly the same every time with both helmets, which was my optimal position that I ride when I'm time trialing. Of course, if you have any further questions or details that you want to know on this, then you feel free to ask me in the comments down below. Righto, we're back and I've collated all the data into a spreadsheet so we can make some use of it. As I said at the start of the video, there are some things to consider here. First of all, because there's some interesting stuff in here, I would actually quite like your help and your thoughts as to why this data is like this. The helmet is very person specific and position specific. So what works for me might not work for you. Secondly, I was just running the bike in my training and triathlon setup. This is what it looks like normally. And the second thing to consider, my position of my hands was slightly different. I normally lay them on top of one another like this in this photo here. But because I was always cornering and banking, I decided just to hold it in a standard position as you would normally hold the bars. Here is my whole data sheet. So if you want to go really deep into the data, you can see all of the laps, all of the splits, and you can see the fastest and slowest times on there as well. One thing we did also decide to do was remove the first lap, as in all of the runs bar one, the first lap was the slowest lap, so we just thought there might have been some inconsistencies in that one. But we have also done the data with the first lap included as well if you need that too. Right, so over the 15 laps, which was about 4.85 kilometers in total, with the Poc Tempor, I tested an average of 7 minutes, 4 seconds and 9 milliseconds. Call it 7.5, it's very close. Then for the Giro Aerohead, I averaged 7 minutes, 7 seconds, 0.3. So close to a 2.5 second difference averaged when you compare the Poc Tempor to the Giro Aerohead. The data then becomes more interesting because pretty much all of that difference from the Aerohead to the Poc Tempor was found on the first run. The total for the first run was 6 seconds slower compared to about 1 second faster or 1 second slower on the second 2 runs. Now, part of me thinks this could be the wind conditions, or maybe the tyres warming up, but if you look at the data through run one on the Giro Aerohead, it's very consistent. And if the tyres are warming up, you'd normally expect to see those times come down consistently, but not in this case. I was also hoping, because I was alternating between helmets, that this would eliminate any wind, but this could have played a factor on this run specifically. When it came to power, I genuinely averaged 250 watts for all of these, so I was very happy with my success in terms of averaging the right power over the run. So if we look right at the bottom here, you can kind of see we're only going to look at 16 and 40 kilometer time trials compared to the two. Reason being because I'd only ever use the top Poc Tempor over a 16 or 40k time trial. I wouldn't really use it for any longer because it is tough to hold that position. So for the Poc Tempor, 25 minutes and 1 second estimated, and there's a 9-second gap to the Giro Aerohead for the total time. And the times are looking similar if you remove the first lap as well. Then over 40 kilometers, it's looking like the Poc Tempor might be almost 32 seconds quicker than the Giro Aerohead. But like I said, if you remove that first run, they become pretty similar again. And if you want to extrapolate further, there's a 90 kilometer for the half Ironman distance and 180 kilometers for the full Ironman distance. So for reasons, I'm just making up hypotheses here, but I think one of the main reasons as to why they're very similar speeds is the Poc Tempor has a better connection with the back of my back, but it actually sits higher in the total system. And this is for the exact same held position, whereas the Giro Aerohead has a much flatter surface from the helmet to the back. So I think the air has to do a little bit more work over the Poc Tempor just to get over that first hump. For me, I think I'm quite a big guy. I'm 192 centimeters. I'm quite a broad swimmer. So I would have thought the shoulder protection of the Poc Tempor would have made up for that, or potentially even improved over the Giro Aerohead, but it looks like I was wrong. I think from this, the data is pretty damn inconclusive, especially with that first run. It mixes up the data a little bit. But there it is. I think I'm just going to sell the Poc Tempor because it doesn't seem to be any faster. Of course, if you want to know more information about my protocol and the things I did, you can always ask me in the comments below or privately on Instagram over here. Because like I said, I would quite like to work out a few more things as to why this helmet probably isn't for me. Another interesting fact that we've got here is that the Poc Tempor is medium and large. It only comes as one size, whereas the Giro Aerohead is actually small because I have quite a skinny head. But the general thinking nowadays is that the bigger helmet, because it protects the shoulders a bit more and diverts airflow around it, tend to perform better. But for me, just doesn't seem to be the case. When it came to the power, I actually landed on 250 watts. And the reason being is that I found that 250 watts is almost the sweet spot to providing enough speed for usable test data, but whilst also being able to hold that amount of power for all of the runs. I do believe because I was following this black line, this test is actually has a lot higher ecological validity, so much more real world validity compared to a wind tunnel. You see loads of people in the wind tunnel, they've got their forehead down like that. That's not real. Whereas this was actually a real test. I actually had to look forward where I would be in a real life time trial situation. In some ways, there are kind of a few things that actually I'm glad that the Giro is better for. The first thing going is that visibility. The visors are actually both very visible on both these helmets, but the quality of the visor is actually way better on the Giro. Not only that, for the Poc, it has this rubbish like sticky thing. I'll overlay some quick B-roll now. It's more like Velcro. Whereas this, you can flip it up here for transitional stuff, or if you just want more air, or you can have it in there. It's so easy to use, whereas the Poc, you just can't do that. Once it's on, it's on. Another thing, I actually find that with this helmet, it actually holds onto my head better. The Poc seemed to loosen itself off. Maybe it's just because I've got long hair. This didn't really affect the test data because it was such a short time and I was able to hold the exact same position. But then finally, the last thing that I think is better about this helmet actually is it's easier to hold the position than it is the Poc. I find I can probably look up a little bit more than I can with the Poc and maintain that almost great position from the helmet to the head. Whereas that, if you look up or look around, it's going to punish you because it's going to act like a sail. Whereas this, I think, is better for that. And when you're doing 90 kilometers, 180 kilometers for an Ironman distance events, then this comes in much better. So actually, I'm quite glad that this helmet still works better for me. Well, guys, I've been Jason. This has been Cycling Unboxed. Let me know what you think below. I'll see you in the next video.